and September happens to be real estate month. So yeah, what I'm doing is just reaching out to real estate professionals like yourself and just asking questions and just kind of getting more information. Well, I guess the first question to dive into then, Miss Beverly, tell me a little bit about your background and how you got started in real estate.
All right, so I worked at the University of Central Florida for over 30 years. I started out as one of their base accountants, and by the time I ended my career, I was one of their controllers. I did just about every aspect of accounting and finance for a major institution that you could do, and I retired in 2010. But about 7 or 8 years before I retired, Matt actually gave me financial peace information, the Dave Ramsey book. And my now ex-husband and I had done almost no saving at that point, not of any significance. And all of a sudden, I saw this train coming at me, and I said, whoa, I got to do something. So in 2005, I got a very nice raise. It increased my revenue by 45%. And we continued to live at the old rate, and I invested and saved that money for the next few years until I retired in 2010. During that time, I did a little bit of stock trading, and I decided that wasn't my thing. Now, you guys are awesome at it, I understand, but we all have different personality types.
Totally.
And as a older individual, I wanted something with recurring income that wasn't subject to fluctuation, that kind of thing. And I was looking. My ex actually got a course from Wright Thurston. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's one of the gurus out of the 1990s and early 2000s. And I was adamant I was not going to go, and I didn't. But he bought a course while he was there, and he came home and put it on the shelf and did nothing with it. But I thought, doggone it, we paid all this money. And I started listening to what the man said, and I thought, oh my gosh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in 2007, I started actively looking for properties, and Matt and I had a I can't think of his name right now, that we signed up for that did apartments. And I bought my first little apartment community in 2008. And I also joined Real Estate Investors of Nashville. Actually, that was in 2007.
Okay.
And started attending real estate investing meetings and just trying to get as much information as I could. When I really get excited about the stuff, I almost become one track, and I'm sure you and Matt were probably that way when you started as well, because there's just so much information.
Yeah.
But anyway, I spent a lot of time and money on training and mentors, and next I purchased a mobile home park. I got my shirt handed to me on that one. My partner decided that she didn't want to pay she was in complete control. This was a syndication, but she was not she was not maybe the most credible. And she decided not to pay the mortgage anymore, but collected the rent. And for the next 3 years, we began, they started foreclosure. Luckily, I wasn't on the mortgage, and there was absolutely nothing I could do. Hired a lawyer, did all kinds of things, but in the end, all I did was spend good money after bad, and so I quit.
Gotcha.
I invested in another apartment community, but in 2012, I really found my love, which is self-storage. I met a national guru through Real Estate Investors of Nashville, and he was just getting started in the education business. And he taught me just about everything I know, he and his team. And I bought my first facility in 2012. And I've never looked back. I love storage. It's my passion now.
Oh, nice. I love that. So why self-storage? What do you feel like kind of brought you into that? Because you're absolutely right. With investing, there's always different little, niches here and there. Why do you feel that one just kind of drew you?
Well, I was looking for relatively passive income. Now, obviously, whenever someone has a business, if you make it entirely passive income, you have really got to be able to trust somebody. And I'm not of that mindset. But in this case, you can train somebody, you can watch it from a distance, and you don't have to be there every day, which I really like. That's one thing that drew me. Another thing was the cost of entry. Now, compared to other rental real estates, and truthfully, self-storage is just a rental business. You're renting a unit or an open parking place month after month, and it's not depleted. It's always there. And hopefully, if you keep it up, it's going to be in as good a shape or better than when you bought it. And over time, you can raise your rent so you can keep up with inflation. You know, it just had so many pluses. So that was one thing. The cost of entry was another one. Now, when you have, like the apartments, you have plumbing, you have electrical, you have windows, you have halls, you have blah, 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 blah. But with storage, you have a garage shed. It's pretty cool. Now, some of them have air conditioning and some don't, and some are a little bit fancier than others, but it's pretty low cost of entry comparatively. And in some cases, as much as little as 50% of the cost of an apartment. Just depends on what you're buying, and a lot of it depends on the land. Another thing is the cost of management. With the apartments that we were doing, anywhere from about 50 to 55% is the national average for the management that you need to do. But in self-storage, it's about 40. So you have that higher profit margin. The managing it remotely was a big thing for me. So I could do it anywhere in the United States if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Another thing. Yeah. Another thing is the cost of a turn. So if somebody moves out of an apartment or a house that you're renting, you got to go in, you got to have it professionally cleaned, or at least we did. You got to paint the walls, you got to clean the carpet. A lot of times you got to deodorize. There may be damage that needs to be repaired. But with storage, you can just blow it out or sweep it out and wipe down the unit, and you're done. You're ready to go again. You're not dealing with people's homes. You know, there's a lot of emotion when you deal with people's homes. And one of the last things that I did before we bought this, and I said, man, this isn't for me, was that there was a lady who maybe didn't make the best choices, but she had 2 children, found out she was pregnant, and she decided to stop paying the rent. She was still working. She could have afforded it. But for whatever reason, she decided to stop paying the rent in November. And I just could not bring myself to start the eviction on a lady she would then have 3 little kids, one of them a newborn at Christmas.
Yeah.
By the time I got her out, and the Tennessee lien law is what storage is under. The Landlord-Tenant Act is what apartments are under. So under the lien law, you can start selling someone's good at 30 days. But with the Landlord-Tenant Act, generally takes 60 to 90 days to get them out. And by the time she moved out, there was just a huge debt. And she thought she was doing me a disservice. But what she didn't know is that I had her mom co-sign, which is just smart management. I mean, it wasn't anything underhanded or anything. But what I did was, once we got the judgment against her, I put a lien on her mom's house. And that mom and that girl paid off that debt for the next 3.5 years. And it just broke my heart. You know, I couldn't not do it, but I just said, I don't think this is for me. And then there are other sources of income. If you do storage, you can sell boxes and locks and insurance and things like that. So to me, it just made sense.
What are the cons of self-storage?
Well, you still have to buy the place. And
sure.
You got to come up with money, and it's a sunk cost. Right now, most banks charge about 25%. They want a 25%. It's called loan to value. So you have to make a 25% down payment. You got to manage the thing. You know, we had a manager on the other side of the state, and she decided she was going to help herself. And I knew she was stealing. I knew that something wasn't right, but I just couldn't put my hands on it. It took about 6 months before I finally tracked it down. And I found out that she had access into the software to change the end date of the units, of the tenants' due dates.
Oh, wow.
Who knew? Who knew that you even had that access, right?
Yeah.
Which you don't know, you know. And when I found out, I got some help from the people who were knowledgeable with the software. And I realized, oh my gosh, she's been stealing every single month since we've had this. And we struggled, you know. We struggled because it just wasn't making what it was supposed to.
Sure.
So you still can have people steal from you. You still have to manage it. You have to manage people. There's taxes. Obviously, you know, you all are trading, and there are different taxes, but there's real estate taxes, and you got to pay those. And I do syndications, and so there's franchise and excise taxes because of the structure we use. You gotta manage, and you gotta be there, and you gotta keep your finger on it, just like anything. You can't just walk away.
Sure.
So those are the main things.
Which I appreciate that honesty too, because a lot of people will make, you know, they say the word passive income. I mean, it's a great word and all, but you know, how passive is it? Like, there's always going to be some varying degree of time and effort and energy.
Well, hopefully. I mean, there are those people who have managers that they totally trust and they're totally above board, but I don't think they're very common nowadays.
Yeah, I can respect that. Regarding, you mentioned a fun word. I've heard it a lot, and I'll be discussing it, I'm sure, frequently this month, but you mentioned the word syndication. So what is that exactly?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to use that word. The way I'm using it is where one person raises funds, different people's investing funds, to buy an asset, and then that one person is in charge of the asset. And we do a Securities and Exchange Commission Reg D syndication. And I know there are different kinds, but basically you can only have a certain number of qualified investors. That would be someone whose net worth is at least $1 million exclusive of their home, an individual who has at least $200,000 in income for 2 years, and other things. You know, it really is irrelevant, all the details. We won't get too far into the minutia of that. But basically, if you are in charge of somebody else's money, according to the Securities and Exchange Commission, then you should follow certain guidelines, and that's what we're doing.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes valid sense. I mean, so you're talking about assets and kind of protecting that. So when you're talking about syndication, is your goal realistically to just get all those people together? Like, do you go out and actually try to track down that money? Are you trying to find it? Are you collecting it? What does that look like?
Well, it's really cool because once you get established and you get a reputation, people come to you. And I've had several people. I've got one particular individual who has over $1 million, and we just had a deal fall through, but would have been glad to have invested in that. But when you first start out, yes, you have to get yourself established. You have to go out there and tell everyone you know. I change people's retirements. I help people earn the kind of income that they want, you know, and you got to sell yourself. But truthfully, this business is a relationship business, and it's built over time. For me, it has been. And the longer you're in it and the more you produce and you're a proven commodity, the more people come to you. Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's kind of like most business ventures to some degree anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So this will be fun then. Let's kind of switch gears for a moment. Walk me through your either your first deal or your most recent deal. Whichever is most on the top of your mind.
Well, I'll give you my most recent deal because it's kind of the most colorful and the most challenging.
Okay.
So we live in Murfreesboro, and we wanted to build a storage facility here. And I found and purchased 10 acres. And Matt warned me. He said, Mom, this is a different skill set. And boy, was he right about that one. had to go through and get rezoning on the property. And the neighbors decided, even though I checked with several of them prior to purchasing the property, they decided that they didn't want self-storage in their area. And they fought me tooth and nail. And it took me 3 years to get the thing rezoned. Now, during that time, you're talking to banks, you're talking to builders, you're talking to anybody you think might be interested in investing. And you're doing all the background work. But truthfully, you don't accept, at least I don't accept, any money or anything until I am absolutely sure, number one, that the deal is going to go through, and number two, that I think it's going to be profitable. And you do a prospectus. We have an operating agreement. It says how the business will be run, and you do a pro forma of what you think the income and expenses will be and the kind of returns that you can provide, that kind of thing. And in the meantime, you're working with building and codes, you're working with your planning departments, you're working with your engineers and your contractors. It's like a grand symphony. It's just the coolest thing. It's my love. I love doing it.
That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. So, I mean, what is it that you look for then? Like when you're going to make that deal, is there anything specific where you're like, is it land? Is it location? Is it where you're like, man, there's gonna be a lot of demand here, a lot of people moving in, or a certain type of income for the neighborhood?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Oh, cool. All right.
Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find a community that is not in decline. A lot of investors make money in areas that are in decline, but I like to be in growth areas where you know that next year you can feel fairly confident that in the next years the land is going to be more valuable than it is today.
Okay.
I like to go to areas where I especially like a county seat because you've got a government base, usually that's the richest part of any county. I like it where there's a university or a college there because when times get hard, people usually go back to education and, get retrained or whatever. Things that I don't like. I don't like businesses that are subject to economic downturns. And for instance, if the economy goes bad, one of the first things people stop doing is buying cars. Now, obviously, a lot of people have made money in areas where there are automakers, but I don't like those kind of places. That's just my personal preference. Mm-hmm. So I like a strong, diverse economy. I like growth. I like, now, if you're talking about self-storage, a third of your business comes from drive-bys. So you need visibility. You need a road that has some good traffic. Now, there are a lot of older facilities that are built way off the road and even newer facilities that are being built off the road. But then you have an uphill battle. You have to pay more for your marketing. You got to depend more on your website and your, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I want it to be pretty much organic. I had a friend who put some money down on a piece of land because it was a good price, and it could be seen from 40. Now, all of that's great, but how long does it take you to get back there? Do they have to go by other storage facilities on the way to your place, that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And so all of that is a factor because, if you have your choice of 10 different facilities and this one is all the way at the end, the only thing that you can do is make your place cheaper. And because of the location, they're going to stop at the earlier ones. So those are all important. Another thing is what we call supply index. And what that means is that, let me give you an example before I tell you exactly what it means. Have you seen on the downtown area where there's one or two storage facilities and all of a sudden there's more? And there's 100,000 square foot huge storage facility and right next to it another one is built. Yep. You seen that kind of thing? Well, that can be an indication of oversupply. And so what you do is you look out in your neighborhoods 1 to 5 miles generally. If it's in some kind of a downtown area, it would be 1 mile. In one of the suburbs, it might be 3 or 5 miles. Or if it's rural, it can be as much as 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to start counting the number of people there. And then you're going to figure out how much self-storage is already there, because people store where they live and work and play, even if they have to pay more, because you go to those storage units sometimes frequently, although a lot of them don't. And you don't want to be in a position of being oversupplied in that market. And as you know, supply and demand, the more the supply, the less the cost. And equilibrium, which is the amount of supply for the amount of people. And by the way, 1 in 10 families store, is about 7 square feet of storage per person. You can get all kinds of companies who do research for you, or you can really do some of it yourself to get these figures. So if you go out on Google Pro and you find all of the storage facilities within those rings, you know, the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 10 mile, you can actually measure the square footage of those, and it is rough. For instance, if there's hallways and things like that, you wouldn't get that. You wouldn't normally include that, but this is a rough, just like a first blush. So this one individual who bought the land up on 40, because it could be seen from Highway 40, had a supply index there of 23. So there was 23 square foot per capita, and the national average is 7. What that means is there was a gross oversupply already.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I know is that people who are on I-40 aren't necessarily going to stop at the next exit. Most of them are on their way, they're commuting, they're going long distances, etc. And so even though you can see it, and even though there is an advantage, that's not necessarily the best indicator of good visibility.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So you need a good supply index, which would be 7 square feet per capita or less. You need that location. You need to know that it's easy to get to. Oh, that's another thing is, have you ever tried to go to a donut shop, and in order to get there, it's on the wrong side of the street, and the streets have blocks, and it's like, forget it. It's not worth it.
Yep.
So you need easy access. It needs to be easy in and out. It needs to be good visibility. You know, when you're driving I looked at a property the other day, and you pull out to the street, and there's a hill, and it's right at the bottom of this hill, and you maybe can see 20 or 30 feet to the left. Well, that's an accident looking to happen, because when you pull out on a street with a large RV, a boat, or anything else, it takes a while to get up to speed. And so you need good sight lines. You know, you need the proper access. So the long story is there's a lot of things that you look for.
Makes sense. I love it. I was taking some notes. That's a beautiful breakdown. Appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm sure that'll be valuable for a lot of people. Because it's different with different things. Like you mentioned, it kind of depends on what is it you're focusing on, right? What you're trying.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
Yeah, it changes. What's a bad experience with crazy neighbors or
yeah,
anything like that? Because I mean, you're going next to businesses and/or people, I'm assuming.
Right. Well, for me personally, my most difficult challenge was overcoming the neighbors. The neighbors did not want this facility built, and I've talked to many other operators, and this is not uncommon. But these particular neighbors had a personal investment here, because this used to be Grandpa's place. And this man back in the, I don't know, 60s
Is that the name
or
of a
70s.
business, or is that's just what they called it? Like that's their grandpa's house.
It was their grandpa's house.
Okay, I got you. I see.
Yeah, yeah. He bought about 60 acres, and then he divided it over the years and gave some to each of his sons, and then his sons gave some to his grandkids. And, you know, this was the homestead, and they didn't want it changed. And my first venture into this was I hired a civil engineer out of Dixon to save $10,000. Well, what I didn't know is with anything is that all real estate is local. And the people on the planning board here don't know John Doe out of Timbuktu, but they do know Willie, and Willie does a good job, so they're not going to scrutinize Willie's work quite as much as they would this guy out of Timbuktu.
Yeah.
So, and all terrain is different. And the guy that I hired was from a county that has a lot of good soils. Rutherford County, where we are, has a limestone base. And it's just a completely different animal. When we were doing construction here, they were out here with this hydraulic hammer breaking rock. Well, if it had been the guy from Dixon, which is where I hired the engineer from, they would have been out there with bulldozers pushing dirt.
Sure.
So it's just a completely different thing. And I didn't know how the whole process worked. And so my first foot in the water was a complete disaster, and I was turned down, and I should have been. Also, the engineer that I hired did not understand self-storage, and his designs were bad, and we don't need to go into that, but several of the designs were bad.
Yeah.
So I took about 3 or 4 months, and I licked my wounds, and I felt sorry for myself, and I said, I'm going to do this right. And I got every book I could get my hands on storage, building storage. Now, in the meantime, we were already building on we did 4 construction projects on the other side of the state. So we were already building, and I had experience with contractors. But, you know, starting from scratch with civil engineers and all, it's just a different animal. So second time around, I hired a local engineer. I said, I want the best, not cheap,
Yep.
but well worth the money. And the individual that I hired knew how to get the job done. And he told me step by step what I needed to do, and I did it. And I was sure this time that it was going to go through. And to make doubly sure, I hired a rezoning attorney whose firm had a stellar reputation for getting rezonings done.
Sounds like a basic question, but why would you need to get it rezoned? Like that was, is that easy or hard, or how does that work?
It can be hard. Mine was, but it can also be easy. It depends on the area. If you have neighbors that are opposing you, it makes it's an uphill battle. You must get your commissioner on your side. And I did everything that I knew to do, but I did not get my commissioner on my side because my attorney said he was going to do that, and I did not manage it. So not only do you need to get local people that are highly credible, but you have to manage. You cannot leave anything to anybody. You must always be the manager. I learned that the hard way. So anyway, part of the process is you have a public hearing, and all of a sudden the same people who had opposed me the first time were there.
Sure.
Very, very angry, very, we don't want you, we don't want this, why can't you take a hint? And they were very negative. My commissioner was there. He made no commitment at that point. And finally, after listening to them, we showed them the plans. We told them what a great facility it would be. We assured them that we would make it something that would bring the neighborhood up, and they said no, no, no. And finally, afterwards, I stood up and I said, look, my name is Bev at that point, DeLong, and I really want this. This is my dream. I've invested heavily in this. What will it take for you not to oppose me? And they gave me 5 things. And I said, done. And at that point, silly me, I thought that I had it. I thought they would not oppose me because I agreed to every one of their demands.
Right.
And we get in front of the planning commission, and I remember that night the place was absolutely packed. And the county mayor at that point led the proceedings, and they always put the contentious ones at the back. And he put us dead last. And I thought, no, they're not going to oppose us. I had the assurances of my attorney. You know, everything had been done right. I knew that they were not going to oppose us. And person after person after person got up and said how I wasn't credible, how the place was unsafe, you know, anything you can think of that never would have even occurred to me, they said was wrong here. And so with that, we were turned down a second time.
Wow.
Now, we're talking 2 years here. This is not a process that takes days. This is a process that takes months.
Yeah.
You have to get your plans together. You've got to get on the commission's agenda, you know, those kinds of things. If they don't like your plans, they send them back to your engineers and all, and there's soil borings that you have to do. And, of course, we did a feasibility study to make sure our supply index was good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 2 years later, and I'm still in the same place, and I remember being so angry. I'm a very strong Christian, and I just let God have it that night.
Yeah.
And I said, why did you let me start this if you weren't going to let me do it?
Right.
And basically, I got the answer is that I should continue to go on. And so all the public hearings are recorded. And I listened to that particular meeting. Oh, by the way, most of them last 15 minutes. It went on for 2 hours.
Whoa.
And I heard every single complaint, and I wrote it down. Not enough sight lines. Well, normally in this kind of a venture, they needed to be between 500 and 1,000 square feet, and we had 1,800 not square, but running feet. We had 1,800 square feet in one direction, and I don't remember in the other, but we were fine in our sight lines. There's too many accidents. I proved through statistics that there were fewer accidents on this section of the road than there were on a 5-lane section of road just a couple of miles up. And I met every single objection with facts and figures. And I gave each of the planners that night a packet of information that outlined it with my source and my calculations. But another thing that we did is I made sure that I kept my commissioner informed of what was going on, and I asked for his support. And when he saw what I had done, he said, yes, Beverly, I will support you.
Yeah.
And that was a gutsy move because there were a lot of people there opposing it. As a matter of fact, in the 5-mile area here, there's probably, I don't know, not that many people, but especially in the 1-mile area that would be impacted.
Sure.
And yet they had 110 signatures on a petition to stop the storage units. Did you know that there were people in Florida that did not want this storage unit to come here?
That's wild. Now, would their name matter at all or no?
No, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. If they don't look at it closely, they'll say, oh, we got 110 signatures. But the thing is, you got to look between the lines, and you've got to make a point for it. And so when they delivered that petition, I took it apart. I read it. I looked on maps. Where are these people from? And there were people from Walter Hill, which is the very, very north part of Murfreesboro, all the way into Nashville and as far away as Florida. And I tore that apart. And then I showed them statistics on the road, and I tore that apart. And I gave them a logical case for every single thing. And just a few days before the meeting, my engineer said, you know, Beverly, all these people come and they say that you're not credible. We need people who will say that you're a credible person. And I said, oh, golly, what do I do here? And just a couple days before the meeting, I asked a few friends. Some said they could help and some said they couldn't. But I'm on the board of the Real Estate Investors of Nashville, and the word got out among the board members. And that night, I was absolutely blown away. There were as many people there for me as against me. And one would get up and say how I was a liar and a cheat, and the next one would say, no, she's credible. And when the vote came through, it was 14-4, and I think 3 or 4 against, and it passed.
What a mission. But congratulations. Like, I was on
3 years and 2 months.
Wow.
To get that.
And you put in work.
Oh, it was some of the most challenging stuff I'd ever done.
Man. So has it been worth it up to this day? Is that a good performing unit?
Oh yeah. Now we so you get the zoning permit, but what you have to, or the zoning approval, excuse me. But then you have to really get into the nitty-gritty of it. You have to submit to the Planning Council something called a planner's book. And it shows the basic outline. It has to be to scale. It shows where you want your driveway. It wants all that kind of thing. And so you do all of that, but then you get down to the nitty-gritty. Well, how many of each size unit? Where are the drive lanes exactly going to be? What about the drainage? You have to do, it's called a topo, so that you have good drainage. The last thing you want is water standing in any of your drive lanes or getting into your buildings. And the real work then began. And it took me months to get all of these things lined up. As a matter of fact, the guy who was our excavator, I'd had a bad experience in one of our other projects, and I said, I want the best excavator in the county. And the guy that I wanted had 1 year and 2 months on his waiting list because he was so good, everybody wanted him. And I said, tell him I want him, and I gave him a down payment, and I signed a contract. So we didn't actually break ground. I think that it was approved in October or November of 17, but we didn't actually break ground until late November, I think it was, of 18. It was a little bit earlier than that. I lose track of the exact dates. But anyway, it took forever, it seemed. And then during that time, we had cost increases. I don't know if you remember President Trump put an import tariff on several things, one of which that we need a lot of is steel. And we had to take the delivery of some of the steel early to avoid some of the import tariffs, but some of the components we couldn't, like the doors and all, and there was a 20% add just because of that particular item. And of course, you've got a budget. You know what it's supposed to cost, and all of a sudden, costs start going higher and higher. And so, I think if anybody's interested in doing development, you need to. Normally, when you underwrite, you have a 10% cost overrun that you allow for, but in this case, it was almost 20%. And I had to fund some of it through debt. I loaned it to the company. In the meantime, several of my friends in groups that I'm in, became interested in it, and I had no trouble raising the money, but just the distance and the time and all the things that we did. But now, is it performing? We've been open since April, and this area is considered one of the hot spots of the county in Rutherford County. And I've seen several articles that Murfreesboro and particularly Rutherford County are two of the fastest growing areas in the nation. As a matter of fact, 1,900 homes have just been approved down the road from us, and there are several other subdivisions going in. And I absolutely am convinced that this was the right thing to do. Not only are we going to have great occupancy, but we have the ability, we've been approved already to do a second phase of development, and then we'll start on the third and maybe even more. So I'm very pleased with the asset and the performance.
I love it. That makes sense. I mean, I totally understand that, and just looking through it all, I mean, I'm like I said, glad that occurred. Are you only doing Tennessee locations or units, or are you doing more?
I'm only doing Tennessee right now. because I'm already retired from one job and I've recently married, I want to slow down.
Sure.
I probably would have done things nationwide because you can do this anywhere. I became a mentor for my coach and mentor, who was a national guru, and I did that for 5 or 6 years. And I traveled around the United States, and I was a speaker at several of his events, that kind of thing. And it can be done anywhere. You don't have to just do it in your hometown. But in my case, I personally want to see the asset, and I want to be close to it, and I want to do a few select cherries. I want them to be very, very good deals.
Yeah. Yeah, I can respect that. It makes tons of sense. Plus you got to specialize in what you want, what you're looking for, right?
Right.
So what's the next goals then from here? Are you trying to collect a portfolio of these bad boys, or do you have like an end goal where you're like, once I build this type of unit or this type of space, I'm totally done, or are you just going to keep collecting them over time?
Oh, I'll probably always collect assets. It's just fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were just working on a 39-acre deal. We were going to build some high-end boat and RV storage. But we lost the contract on the land. It doesn't mean that we can't build it somewhere else.
Sure.
But I'm really not sure right now. Having recently gotten married, I want to make sure that it fits in my new life and that my husband and I are comfortable with what we're doing at this point. So I don't really know yet what we're going to do. At one point, I had said I wanted to have 12 of these, and I passed on a couple things because of this Murfreesboro deal. Otherwise, I probably would have several more.
Right.
But it's a lot of my energy and capital to get this thing to market. So I don't know yet. Don't know.
Yeah, understandable. Very understandable. Well, I truly appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing those riveting stories and giving us some of your wisdom and knowledge and expertise in this field.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it was very beneficial, and I hope you have an incredible rest of your week.
You too.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for those who are listening in, that is Beverly Krueger, aka Matt's mom. But never met her in person yet. She does live here in the Nashville area, and my goal very soon is to meet with this incredible human being and just get more insight and, like I said, wisdom and knowledge. Some of the things that you brought up about reading and diligence and focus and not giving up in the overwhelming odds of just pain and anguish and challenges. There's always a solution to a problem. So our goal is to find it, push through it, and keep focused on our objective and our outcome. So Beverly, thank you so much for that for your time. For those who are listening in, I hope this was a beneficial interview. Thank you for being a part of Real Life Trading. Thank you for watching and listening. And until next time, love life, live life, and trade it. Bye.